Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks once again for being here with us on KAKM for Sunday's show. Looking at the fire danger here, still extreme and high fire dangers, the mid and Tanana Valley over the 40-mile country through the Alaska Range passes and Copper River Basin. In the case of the Copper River Basin for the very dry conditions, and then a combination of dry conditions and gusty winds still blowing through the passes of the eastern Alaska Range. And that's out through this evening again until about 10-11 p.m. this evening when the humidities go back up and the conditions ease off a little bit. For the breakup map, there's a flood watch out for the Porcupine River here, and open water over the Yukon all the way down till you get to about Russian Mission. From there on over, there's a little more significant ice running there, so have it just some open there, or mostly open. And then there's a flood warning out for Amonik and Alakanuk for ice jam flood warning for tonight and tomorrow. And on the satellite imagery here, the Western Pacific, Kamchatka Peninsula right there, the Sea of Okhotsk and Shakopin Island. This is the next storm system that'll be bringing the gale force winds into the western and central Aleutians late tonight and tomorrow, and along with some rainfall. And over the goes west imagery, you can see the cloudiness here, kind of the western half of the state, cloudy, cool, and unsettled, kind of damp, and the eastern half is sunny, warm, and dry, with temperatures reaching again into the lower to mid 80s over toward Eagle this afternoon, with dry conditions and temperatures reaching up near 70 or a little above all the way down the southeast coast. Some of these clouds here over Prince of Wales Island develop into some scattered thunderstorms this afternoon, and probably brought a little bit of rain down to that area possibly, but nothing too widespread. Otherwise, a lot of sunshine back to the north and North Gulf Coast after the low clouds burned off the coastline. Sunshine this afternoon. Again, that extends over into south central Alaska. And then you start picking up the mid and high level clouds here, western Cook Inlet, and along the Alaska Range, a few isolated showers. On the chart, there's those showers that extended up to the north there to just east of Norton Sound. And this front giving a band of rain from the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, north-northwest, all the way to the Seward Peninsula, and some showers up over the northwest. 24-hour rainfall amounts range from about 1/3 of an inch at Akiak and Chignik up to 1/4 of an inch across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta areas. Otherwise known, picked up about 1/10 of an inch of rain. And Kotzebue had 1600ths. Pretty gusty winds with this front as well, with cold basing wind gusts to about 40 miles an hour or a little above earlier today, and to about 35 miles an hour at Cape Newenham. Otherwise, the winds out here south-southeast 15 to 30 miles an hour from Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula all the way up to the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Strait. For tonight, that front edges a little bit inland here, not too far. We're bringing a band of rain from the northwest valleys southward across eastern Norton Sound, the Koyukuk Valley there, back across the lower and mid-Yukon Kuskokwim valleys out to Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island, again, the heaviest rainfall falling on the southwest part of the island, drier there on the east side. Risk of a shower or two here in the southern Kenai Peninsula coast with just some mostly cloudy skies south of the forelands here for Cook Inlet, and then back to the west. Dry and clear here from the North Gulf Coast. Could be some low clouds redevelop right along the coastline late tonight with some patchy areas of fog. Otherwise, dry conditions, mostly clear skies. And winds for the most part on the light side all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, and dry conditions, light winds here across the panhandle. Most of the showers should be over in Canada, but every once in a while one of those sneak on over across the border like they did today. And then the next system down here bringing an increase in the wind late tonight, and then tomorrow gale force winds gusts 40 to 50 miles an hour here for the central Aleutians, coming back northeasterlies at about the same speed for the western Aleutians, with rain spreading in toward the Nikolsky area by the afternoon hours. Otherwise, the Pribilof's kind of in a break there, so light winds, maybe a peek at the sun. And that'll extend down across the Alaska Peninsula. This weakening front now stalled out here. Big area high pressure keeping this back to the west, and it's lying parallel to the wind flow aloft, south to north. So there's still a narrow band of rain here from the northwest all the way down the west side in toward northeast Bristol Bay to southwest Kodiak Island, and then some scattered showers again develop over the western Alaska Range areas, maybe the Kuskokwim Valley on up to the north, and a risk of a shower for the Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise variably cloudy for Cook Inlet, south central Alaska. Another mostly clear day tomorrow. Sunshine across the Copper River Basin. No change at all for the eastern interior, except maybe a little less wind through the Alaska Range passes than what we've seen the last couple of days. So that'll help the fire danger out a little bit there, but staying quite dry through this entire area. Dry down the panhandle. Again, isolated thunderstorms possible here over toward the border and over the southern areas, but nothing very widespread at all. Then we'll see the forecast for Tuesday. That front, what's left of it, just brings a few showers here to the southwestern interior, down toward Kodiak Island. Isolated showers up around Iliamna Lake, Kamishak Bay regions. And then that next front pushes the rain, gusty winds here. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, gusts to 30, 35 miles an hour out of the southeast there. Cold Bay with rain as far up the coastline there as possibly Pilot Point or more likely Port Hayden. Rain, gusty winds, fog, Pribilof Islands, and some gusty northeast winds and some scattered showers out over the west central Aleutians. High pressure holding in the Gulf of Alaska, so not much change here for this entire area. Southern Alaska staying nice. Maybe some clouds over the Kenai Peninsula areas and up along the Alaska Range, but a lot of sunshine, dry conditions for the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound looking good. The southeast coast mostly dry, variable clouds again, isolated showers along the eastern border, any one of which could develop into a isolated thunderstorm as well. And that same pattern going on up here over from about Eagle northward. Could see some isolated thunderstorms developing in the afternoon hours. Otherwise, leftover moisture here resulting in mostly cloudy skies and some scattered showers over the northwest and north central interior, all the way up even on the north slope there. High pressure up along the Arctic coast, light winds that'll allow the low clouds and fog to increase a little bit again on the east side there and even back to the west a little bit right under that ridge axis. Temperatures this afternoon ranged from 68 at Klawock, these are 4 p.m. readings, to 58 at Sitka. Same thing over at Petersburg. The state capital up to 66 today. Yakutat had 55 with 53 at Cordova. Valdez 52 degrees, but a night warmer 68 up at Golcana. 63 degrees in Talkeetna with 57 at Palmer. 54 down at Homer. Kenai had 51. Seward 52 degrees. And up in the Tanana Valley, very nice conditions up there with temperatures in the upper 60s to lower 70s, 73 at Fairbanks, 72 at Delta, Tanana at 68, 82 degrees there at Eagle today. About yesterday they were up to 84 and 75 over at Fort Yukon, 70 degrees over at in the Koyukuk Valley there at Bettles, with 63 at Anatuvik. Up along the Arctic coast, above freezing south to north winds there. Pushing temperatures to 35 at Barrow, 46 at Dead Horse, and Atchison and Point Lay both at 42, Cape Lisburne 46. Chillier 39 at Point Hope with 41 at Kivalina, 46 there at Kotzebue, 45 both at Nome and at White Mountain and Golovin, 37 at Tin City with 36 at Gamble on St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise in the Kuskokwim Valley, McGrath had 59, 57 at Galena, with 52 at Sleepmute and then 48 down at Bethel. Mid to upper 40s along the coastline of the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. Mid 40s for the Pribilofs and the Alaska Peninsula. Temperatures range from 54 at King Salmon to 46 at False Pass. On Alaska, 48 today. Mid 40s here for the remainder of the Aleutians. And checking out the low temperatures for tonight. 30s for the Arctic coast and North Slope area into the Brooks Range. South of the mountains, though, mid to upper 40s here through the interior. A little chillier over the central interior with upper 30s to lower 40s here over the Copper River Basin areas, and then lower to mid 40s here over the southwest, but along the coast, temperatures in the mid to upper 30s. Lower to mid 40s for Bristol Bay, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and temperatures in the upper 30s here for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Lows over the southeast coast, all in the 40s. And then the highs for tomorrow down that way, upper 50s along the coast to upper 60s, so maybe even near 70 again over the south. In the interior, no change. Again, 70s, upper 60s, 70s to lower 80s over the 40-mile country. Eagle looking at a high tomorrow of 81 degrees. Up along the Arctic coast, 40s to lower 50s, especially over the North Slope, 50s to maybe lower 60s, with 60s through the Brooks Range at 68 for Arctic Village, 76 for Fort Yukon, and upper 40s to upper 50s here over the northwest. Cooler along the coast, of course, with lower 40s there for the western Seward Peninsula. Over the southwest interior, looking at upper 40s to mid to upper 50s, with the Kuskokwim Valley again in the lower 60s. 50s for Bristol Bay, right around 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, and 40s out over the Aleutians. For flying weather, good VFR here from the eastern Arctic coast southward through the central and eastern interior right down into south central Alaska. So marginal VFR possible here for Kodiak Island and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that could slip on up into southern Cook Inlet and possibly even, Kamishak Bay and possibly even Kachemak Bay. But VFR here along the North Gulf Coast, this area low clouds. Looks like it'll be off the coast for tomorrow afternoon, much like it was today. So good VFR the entire stretch of the southeast coastline there. Then out to the west with the incoming storminess, big area IFR from just east of Attu Island across the central Aleutians, and then conditions coming down here for the eastern Aleutians, especially in the afternoon hours. Marginal VFR for the Pribilofs, and that'll extend up to St. Lawrence Island and into the Bering Strait. Southerly winds on the lee side of the peninsula here. Look for a patch of VFR conditions, but IFR again from, say, Kotzebue right up the coastline, Kivalina around to Cape Lisburne. Marginal VFR on the western Arctic coast. Looking at the passes for Anatuvik, open on both entrances tomorrow. Adigan, VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, both passes there, VFR. And rainy east and west, VFR. For windy, VFR conditions expected. Isabel, VFR. And for Mentasta, VFR. Tanita looks VFR. Portage will be VFR tomorrow on both entrances, and Chilkoot and White, both VFR. Looking at the freezing levels, 2,000 feet here over the northern Bering Sea to just west of the Pribilofs on down to just east of Atka, with 4,000 feet over the western interior. Then it's about 4,000 to 6,000 feet warmer here over the eastern interior. Big area, 10,000 feet, associated with an upper level ridge here over northwest Canada. 8,000 to 10,000 foot freezing levels there across the southeast coast. And then a little more of a thermal gradient there just south of the Aleutians, associated with that incoming system. And for icing threats tomorrow, with that front pushing the moisture up first tonight into the west central Aleutians, spreading over by tomorrow morning into the central areas, and then now stream eastward to about Unmak Island, Nikolsky. In the afternoon, that all the light isolated moderate rime icing below 12,000 feet out there. And also some icing here, continue that south to north flow across southwest Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range, and some of that extending over to southern Kenai Peninsula, but the bulk of it out here spreading northward through the west central interior, and then areas of that scattered around up over the northwest, the Seward Peninsula, maybe over to St. Lawrence Island, but icing free here over the eastern interior and all of the southeast coast and the Gulf of Alaska. Looking at the winds aloft, again, a tremendous area of high pressure here over the Northwest Territories centered over in Canada, but it extends out and keeps the jet stream here to the west coast at 50 to 65 knots up and over the top down into Hudson Bay. Pretty good trough out here over the west central Bering Sea. 9,000 foot winds showing southerly winds 25 knots here south to north, up to 30 knots along the west coast, and then dropping back to 15 for the Alaska Peninsula. And then an increase in those southeasterlies, 35 to 40 knots, supporting those gale force winds there over the western and central Aleutian areas. Lighter northwest breezes there along the southeast coast. Light variable winds here under high pressure for the Gulf of Alaska and southern Alaska. And for the 3,000-foot winds, light variable conditions here in the east side with just a northwest breeze 10 to 15 there along the panhandle, right along the coastline, even lighter over the inland areas. South 15 knots with 25 to 30 knot winds here from the Yukon Delta up across the western Seward Peninsula on into the Chukchi Sea. And turbulence-wise, a couple areas here, one here from the Bering Strait southward to Nunivak Island, could be a little choppy there over the Kilbuck Mountains, and then from Kodiak Island northward here through the west central interior to the central Arctic coast, could be light to isolated moderate chop, and then moderate turbulence with that front and those gale force winds for the central Aleutian extending back to Amchitka and Kiska, and then improving out towards Shemya. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening, our guest is Jeff Oshinsky. Jeff has had a distinguished career in federal service for 27 years, with 17 years in Alaska. In the early 90s, he was the manager at the ARTCC, later managed at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit and the Anchorage Volcano Advisory Center. He's now the Deputy Chief for Environmental and Scientific Services Division. In short, the Regional Weatherman. Jeff, welcome to Hangar Flying.
Oh, great. Thanks. It's great to be here, Harry.
Oh, welcome back. You've been on the program before.
Thanks, yes.
Obviously, weather forecasting is extremely important to pilots and operators and people involved in aviation. And you, the National Weather Service, has got a big operation up here in Alaska. I think latest numbers I saw were 240 people and 19 stations. It's a big effort. And I got to tell you, I appreciate what you guys do. You've got a tough challenge, and it makes doing the professional job that you do contributes significantly to aviation safety. So thanks very much. Let's talk a little bit about one initiative that you and I had talked about with future potential. So describe some of the modernization efforts.
Well, Harry, we're in the process now of modernizing our aviation services in Alaska. And what that means is basically going from an old way of doing business of typing up forecasts and creating graphics by hand, essentially, to going to this digital database. And what this means, it will allow us to be able to derive a whole variety of products, basically whatever the users really want from this digital database. And the beauty of that is all our offices in Alaska will be tied to this database. So whether you're a pilot or a mariner or whatever forecast you happen to look at, it's all being pulled from the same database and will be consistent.
So give me an idea, give our viewers an idea what a new product might look like. What exactly will it do that we can't have done now?
Well, I think the biggest change that we're going to see is we're going to see probably better resolution in the product. So in other words, we have the standard products like the MVFR, IFR flying charts and turbulence and icing. I think what we'll be able to see in the future is we'll be able to see more resolution and granularity in the forecasts. So we'll be able to forecast more distinct layers of icing and turbulence, and we'll also be able to put these products out on a more frequent basis.
Now, one of the things you mentioned to me, if I got it right, I think is very futuristic. And let's see if I can describe it right. So right now, if I'm coming back into Anchorage, I can get a terminal forecast for Anchorage, or I can get a terminal forecast for Elmendorf. But I think you're talking about maybe someday in the future, dirt strip XYZ with, you can give me an idea what the weather's going to be there.
I think so. It's pretty exciting with this digital database. Part of the initiative is to improve our computer modeling. And of course, the computer modeling sort of drives how well we can produce forecasts. And as we get better and more specific models for Alaska that show the differences geographically, we'll be able to push that into this process. And so I think, this may be a few years out, but I think we'll be at a point sometime where a pilot can take his, we'll say his cursor of his mouse on his computer and move it to any location in the state and click on that spot that he's interested in, he or she is interested in, and get a forecast that'll have aviation weather parameters for that site.
Wow.
I really do think that we'll get there in a few years.
That's huge. I mean, when you add that to the introduction of weather cams, we're going to have, it's really going to make an impact.
It's going to open the doors. We keep saying that this is a major paradigm shift in aviation forecasts, and the really exciting part for us here in Alaska is we're on the cutting edge. We're sort of the pathfinder for these digital aviation services. Nobody else is doing this in the country, and all eyes are focused on us up here in Alaska.
I'm going to ask this last question about forecasting. Is it science, black magic, or luck, or all three?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I saw a cartoon repeatedly throughout my career that said meteorology is 60% science and 40% art. And I've seen the numbers flipped around, 60% art, 40% science. And so the big joke is that it's sort of a combination of all those things. When you talk to forecasters, they often talk about having a gut feeling. We're trained to understand patterns, and weather patterns dictate certain weather conditions. So, you know, many of us can look at a weather map and look at a pattern and say, I don't think they're going to get the rain in Anchorage. I think it's going to be a turbulence event on the Chugach or whatever, just based on the weather pattern. And a small change in that pattern can totally change the weather for a given location.
Wow. Well, all kidding aside, I appreciate what you do and your fellow forecasters and the whole weather business, and I think you've saved a lot of people and prevented a lot of accidents. So thanks very much for your efforts.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks a lot, Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. And again, I want to remind you, November 15th, we're going to have our fall safety seminar. That's Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, November 15th. More details to follow. Until later, till next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, 4 days ago on May 13th, this is what the ice looked like here over the northern Bering Sea. And we'll see today's analysis shows it a little farther to the north and definitely broken up here. It's two separate islands now, or actually this separate island, and it's forecast to continue to drift off to the north and northwest, and this may break off, probably will break off in about 4 days from now. So moving on to the southeast coast here, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots on the central and south coast, westerlies at 15 up to the north. South 15 for northern Lynn Canal, northwest 10 to 15 knots for the central and southern inside water areas, with those seas running 2 to 3 feet. And then for Tuesday, no change up here in the north. Northwesterlies at about 20 knots all the way down the remainder of the coastline, seas running 6 to 7 feet, and no change over the inside waters as well. Northwesterlies 10 to 15, except northern Lynn Canal will be south, especially in the afternoon, at about 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for the Prince William Sound zone, southwesterlies at 15, same thing for northern Cook Inlet. West winds at 15 for the North Gulf Coast, and southeasterlies up to 20 knots here on the east side of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, southeast 10 to 15 for the Barren Islands on into Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait. And the outlook for Monday, not a lot of change. High pressure holding over the northeast Pacific and the Gulf of Alaska. So southwesterly winds here for the western Gulf Coast to westerlies here for the central areas. No change for Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound, and still southeasterlies 15 to 20 knots here from the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay, and 10 to 15 knots southeast winds for Kodiak Island. Looking at Bristol Bay tomorrow, southeasterlies at about 15 knots, up to 20 knots from the southeast here, southwest of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula, south winds at 15 with seas running 4 to 6 feet. And then for Tuesday, small craft advisories there as that next front approaches the area here from the west. So southerlies on the Pacific side at 25 knots, southeast 25. Higher gusts, particularly Cold Bay here in this pattern. Possibly as high as 35 knots there. Southeast 20 knots for Bristol Bay, and the same thing from about Sitkinak over to, say, Chignik. And for the eastern Aleutians, south to southeast winds at 15 knots with 5 to 8 foot seas. Otherwise, gale force winds there for the central Aleutians, east to southeast, 35 knots, seas 12 to 16 feet. North to northeast up to 35 knots with 14-foot seas for the western Aleutians. And then for Tuesday, low center pulls off to the east, so the winds become northwest at about 20 to 30 knots out here in the west. For Adak north to northwest at about 20 knots. Lighter winds here on the east side there. Fox Island south to southeast, 15 to 20 knots with seas running 4 to 9 feet. And then for the southwest coast, south to southeast, 15 knots. Southerlies for St. Lawrence Island. Southeast 15 for the Pribilofs, and pretty light winds here for the northern Bering Sea. They'll swing around to the northeast and pick up to 25 knots on Tuesday. Southeast, east-southeast here for the coast at 20 knots. Lighter winds for St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories back up into the Pribilofs from the east with 8-foot seas. And up along the Arctic coast, southeasterlies 20 knots here from Wales all the way up to Cape Lisburne. And then southeast 15 for the western and central coast. 15 to 20 knot winds here along the eastern stretch of the Beaufort Sea coastline. And then those turn around northerlies with high pressure right about centered here. So southwest at the central coast, they're southwest at 15, northerlies at 10 knots for the eastern coast, and then southerlies here 20 knots from Wales up to Cape Lisburne, and southwest 20 for the western Arctic coast. For tonight again, fair and dry and clear skies here for the eastern half of the state. The western half with its front stalled out right through here. Look for a band of rain to extend from Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range across Bristol Bay, right up all the way into the northwest valleys there. Showers following in behind here with this trough over the eastern Bering Sea all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. Fair skies over the southeast coast with light winds. That next storm again brings gale force winds up into the Aleutians tomorrow, like that, and then this front washing out here in the west over the interior, some scattered showers along the Alaska Range. Another sunny, warm day, temperatures into the 70s over the...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.